What happens when one of Hollywood's biggest stars walks onto a late-night show expecting the usual softball questions, only to face something completely different? When the cameras started rolling on this particular episode, nobody in that studio could have predicted just how uncomfortable things were about to get. Tom Cruise, the man who's spent decades perfecting his public image, was about to experience an interview that would leave him completely speechless. Before we get into exactly what went down, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think happened. Now, let's dive into this absolute train wreck of an interview. The Tonight Show set was buzzing with its usual energy as Tom Cruise made his entrance. The audience erupted into applause, and Jimmy Fallon greeted him with that signature enthusiasm he's known for. Tom waved to the crowd, flashing that million-dollar smile, clearly expecting another smooth promotional appearance. He settled into the guest chair, and Jimmy kicked things off in his typical upbeat style. "Tom Cruise, everybody. Man, it's so good to have you back on the show," Jimmy said, his voice carrying that familiar excitement. "You look great. You always look great. How do you do it?" Tom laughed, leaning back comfortably. "Well, Jimmy, I just try to take care of myself. Stay active, eat right, do my own stunts. Keeps me young." "Speaking of stunts," Jimmy continued, "your new movie has some absolutely insane action sequences. I heard you actually climbed a building without any safety equipment." "That's right," Tom nodded, his enthusiasm genuine. "We wanted it to be as real as possible. I trained for months to prepare for that sequence. When you're up there, hundreds of feet in the air, there's nothing quite like it." The audience applauded, and Jimmy grinned. "That's incredible. Most actors would use a stunt double, but not you. You've built your entire career on doing the impossible." Tom smiled, clearly in his element. "I just believe in giving the audience an authentic experience. They deserve the real thing." "Absolutely," Jimmy agreed. Then his tone shifted ever so slightly, something almost imperceptible. Speaking of authentic experiences, I've been thinking a lot about authenticity lately. What that word really means." Tom's smile remained, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. "Sure, authenticity is everything in this business." Jimmy leaned forward slightly. "Right? Exactly. So here's something I've been curious about. You talk a lot about doing your own stunts, being real, being genuine. But I'm wondering, when was the last time you did something that actually scared you? Not physically, but emotionally." The question hung in the air for a moment. Tom's smile tightened just a fraction. "Well, I think any great role requires you to be vulnerable, to access those emotions." "That's a great answer," Jimmy said, nodding slowly. "But that's not really what I asked, is it? I asked when you last felt scared. Not when you played scared, when you actually felt it." Tom shifted in his seat, his laugh coming out a bit forced. "Jimmy, I'm not sure I follow. Are we still talking about the movie?" "We're talking about you," Jimmy replied, his tone still friendly, but with an edge that hadn't been there before. "See, I've interviewed you, maybe a dozen times over the years? And every single time, it's the same Tom Cruise. Perfect smile, perfect answers, perfect energy. It's like talking to a very well-programmed machine." The audience grew quiet. This wasn't the usual Tonight Show banter. Tom's jaw tightened. "I think that's a bit unfair, Jimmy. I'm always myself when I come on your show. Are you though?" Jimmy pressed. "Because I'm sitting here looking at you right now, and I'm trying to figure out where Tom Cruise ends and the performance begins. Do you even know anymore?" Tom's famous smile had completely vanished. "Now, I don't appreciate what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything," Jimmy said calmly. "I'm asking you a direct question. When you leave the set, when you go home, when there are no cameras around, who are you? Do you ever just let yourself be angry, or sad, or confused like the rest of us?" "Of course I do," Tom replied, his voice sharper now. "I'm human, Jimmy. I have the same emotions as anyone else." "Then show me one," Jimmy challenged. "Right now, show me something real. Not movie star Tom Cruise, not action hero Tom Cruise, just Tom." The studio was dead silent. Tom stared at Jimmy, his expression hardening. "This is really what you want to do? On national television, you want to try to tear me down?" "I don't want to tear you down," Jimmy said, his voice softer now. "I'm genuinely asking. I'm sitting here, and I'm thinking about all these interviews I've done, all these conversations that feel like press releases. And I'm wondering if we ever actually talk to the real people, or if we're all just playing our parts." Tom's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. "You know what, Jimmy? You want real? Here's real. I came on this show tonight to promote a movie that hundreds of people worked on for years. People who poured their hearts into it. And instead of talking about that, you're trying to make this about some philosophical crisis you're having about authenticity." "That's fair," Jimmy acknowledged. "But doesn't that prove my point? Even when you're angry, you're steering the conversation back to safe territory. The movie, the crew, the work, anything but actually engaging with what I'm asking." Tom stood up abruptly. "Are we done here?" "We have about 10 more minutes," Jimmy said, looking up at him calmly. "But if you want to leave, nobody's stopping you." The audience held its collective breath. Tom stood there, clearly wrestling with something internally. Finally, He sat back down, but his posture was completely different now. The ease was gone, replaced by something rigid and defensive. Fine, Tom said coldly. Let's continue this little experiment of yours. Jimmy nodded. Thank you for staying. Look, I know this is uncomfortable, but can I ask you something else? When was the last time someone told you no? Not about a stunt or a scene, but about something you actually wanted. Tom's eyes narrowed at the question. People tell me no all the time. Jimmy, that's part of being in the business. Really? Jimmy tilted his head. Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you've built an entire empire around making sure that doesn't happen. You produce your own films, you have creative control, you surround yourself with people who say yes. So again, when was the last time someone actually told you no about something that mattered to you? Tom's laugh was bitter now, nothing like the warm chuckle from earlier. You think you know me. You think because we've done a few interviews, you understand my life. I don't claim to understand your life, Jimmy replied evenly. That's exactly why I'm asking. Because all I've ever seen is the version you want everyone to see, and I'm curious if there's anything else underneath that. This is absurd, Tom muttered, shaking his head. You're a talk show host, Jimmy. Your job is to make people feel comfortable, to have fun conversations. What is this? Maybe I'm tired of having the same conversation over and over, Jimmy said. Maybe I'm tired of pretending that these interviews mean something when we all know they're just promotional tools. Maybe for once, I want to actually connect with the person sitting across from me. Tom leaned forward, his voice dropping. You want to connect? Fine, let's connect. You sit here every night with your games and your bits and your fake laugh, and you want to lecture me about authenticity. At least I'm honest about what I do. I make movies. I entertain people. I don't pretend it's something deeper than that, but it is deeper than that, isn't it? Jimmy countered. Movies affect people. They inspire them, they move them, they change how they see the world. And you've been in some of the biggest films ever made. Don't you ever think about the responsibility that comes with that? Of course I do, Tom snapped. Every single day. Why do you think I work so hard? Why do you think I push myself to the limit on every project? Because you're afraid, Jimmy said quietly. You're afraid that if you stop for even a moment, if you let yourself be vulnerable or uncertain, the whole thing will fall apart. The words hung between them like a bomb waiting to detonate. Tom's face flushed red. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Jimmy pressed. Look at your career. You never stop. You never slow down. You're always on to the next thing, the next impossible stunt, the next blockbuster. When do you breathe? When do you just exist without having to prove something? Tom's hands were trembling slightly now, and he clasped them together to hide it. I love what I do. Is that so hard to believe? Not everyone needs to take a break or have an existential crisis. Some of us are happy with our choices. Are you happy? Jimmy asked, and the simplicity of the question seemed to hit harder than anything else he'd said. Right now, in this moment, are you happy? Tom opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. The silence stretched out, becoming almost unbearable. Finally, he spoke, his voice quieter than before. That's not a fair question. Why not? Jimmy asked gently. It's the most basic question there is. Because happiness isn't a constant state, Tom said, each word measured. You have good days and bad days. You have moments of joy and moments of struggle. That's life. You're deflecting again, Jimmy observed. I didn't ask you about the philosophy of happiness. I asked if you're happy, yes or no. Tom stood up again, but this time he didn't move to leave. He walked a few steps away from the chair, his back to Jimmy and the audience. The cameras caught every moment of his internal struggle. When he turned back around, his expression was raw in a way that seemed almost foreign on his face. You want to know if I'm happy? Tom's voice cracked slightly. I don't know. I genuinely don't know how to answer that. I wake up every morning, and I do what I'm supposed to do. I work out, I read scripts, I take meetings, I train for stunts, and at the end of the day, I go to bed and do it all over again. And somewhere in there, I'm supposed to figure out if I'm happy. Jimmy remained silent, letting Tom continue. You asked when someone last told me no. Tom went on, his words coming faster now. You want to know the truth. People tell me no all the time, but not in the way you think. They don't tell me no about work. They tell me no about everything else. No, you can't have a normal relationship because you're always working. No, you can't just go for a walk without being mobbed. No, you can't have a private moment because someone's always watching. No, you can't be human because you're Tom Cruise. The audience was completely silent, riveted by this unexpected breakdown of the carefully constructed persona. So you want authentic? Tom's voice was rising now, years of frustration pouring out. Here's authentic. I'm exhausted. I'm tired of always having to be on, always having to smile, always having to be the guy who does the impossible. But I can't stop, because if I stop, what am I? Who is Tom Cruise if he's not jumping off buildings or flying helicopters? Jimmy's expression had softened considerably. You're a person. That's who you are. Am I though? Tom challenged. Or am I just a brand? A product? A carefully maintained image that's become so big I can't escape it even if I wanted to. Do you want to escape it? Jimmy asked. Tom ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that seemed utterly uncharacteristic of the polished star everyone knew. Sometimes I don't know what I want. I've been doing this for so long. I don't remember what it's like to want something just for myself, not for the career, or the image, or the legacy. What would you do? Jimmy asked softly. If you could do anything right now, no cameras, no expectations, no consequences, what would you do? Tom looked at him for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I'd probably just sit somewhere quiet and not talk to anyone for a week. Just exist without having to perform, or explain, or justify myself. That doesn't sound so impossible, Jimmy said. For you maybe, Tom replied with a sad smile. For me, it's as impossible as any stunt I've ever done. Jimmy stood up from his desk and walked over to where Tom was standing. You know what I think? I think the bravest thing you've ever done is happening right now. Not the stunts, not the blockbusters. This being honest. Tom looked at him, vulnerability written across his features in a way that seemed almost painful to witness. Tom wiped at his eyes quickly, as if trying to erase the evidence of emotion before it fully formed. I don't know what you want me to say, Jimmy. You've gotten what you wanted. You've broken down the movie star. Congratulations. Is this good television? This isn't about television, Jimmy said firmly. This is about two people having a real conversation. Maybe for the first time. Real conversations don't happen in front of 300 people and millions watching at home. Tom shot back, you've turned my breakdown into content. Jimmy nodded slowly. You're right, and I'm sorry for that. But I'm not sorry for asking the questions. Someone needed to watch. Tom demanded. Why did it have to be you, on this show, tonight? Because maybe I'm the only one who would, Jimmy replied. Everyone else is too afraid of losing access to you, too worried about burning bridges. But I looked at my calendar this morning and I realized I've interviewed you 12 times. 12 times, Tom, and I couldn't tell you a single thing I learned about you as a person. Not one real thing. And that scared me more than losing you as a guest. Tom walked back to the chair and sat down heavily. You have no idea what it costs to let people in. The moment you show weakness, the moment you admit you're struggling, it becomes a headline. It becomes a joke. It becomes ammunition. For who? Jimmy asked, sitting back down at his desk. For everyone, Tom said, his voice hollow. The press, the public, the people waiting for you to fail. Hollywood isn't kind to vulnerability. You know that. I do know that, Jimmy agreed. But I also know that pretending to be invincible doesn't make you invincible. It just makes you lonely. Tom's jaw clenched. You think I'm lonely? I think you're surrounded by people and completely alone, Jimmy said. I think you've built walls so high that nobody can get close enough to actually see you. And I think that's exactly what you wanted, until it wasn't. You're doing a lot of thinking about my life for someone who barely knows me, Tom said, but there was less bite in his words now. Then tell me I'm wrong, Jimmy challenged. Tell me you go home at night and you have deep, meaningful connections with people. Tell me you let your guard down and show people the parts of yourself that aren't perfect. Tell me I'm wrong, and I'll drop this entire conversation. Tom stared at him for a long moment. I can't tell you, you're wrong. The admission seemed to surprise even Tom himself. He looked down at his hands, studying them as if they belonged to someone else. I have people around me all the time, Tom continued quietly. Assistants, publicists, agents, trainers, My calendar is full every single day. But you're asking me if I feel connected to any of them. And the honest answer is, I don't know. I don't know what connection is supposed to feel like anymore. When was the last time you cried? Jimmy asked. Before tonight, I mean. Tom thought about it, his brow furrowing. I don't remember. Isn't that pathetic? I can tell you the exact date I did a particular stunt, but I can't remember the last time I let myself feel something enough to cry about it. It's not pathetic, Jimmy said gently. It's just sad. And I think the fact that you recognize that is important. What good does recognizing it do? Tom asked, frustration creeping back into his voice. Tomorrow morning, I'm still going to wake up as Tom Cruise. I'm still going to have the same obligations, the same expectations, the same impossibly high standards to maintain. This conversation doesn't change any of that. Maybe it doesn't change the circumstances, Jimmy said, but it might change how you deal with them. Acknowledging the problem is the first step. Isn't that what they say? Tom laughed bitterly. Is this therapy now? Are you my therapist, Jimmy? Do you have a therapist? Jimmy asked without missing a beat. The question clearly caught Tom off guard. He hesitated, then shook his head. No, why not? Jimmy pressed. Because therapists talk, Tom said bluntly. Because nothing stays private. Because the moment I walk into someone's office and admit I'm struggling, it ends up in a tabloid. So you just deal with everything alone. Jimmy stated. I manage, Tom corrected. There's a difference, is there? Jimmy leaned forward. Because managing sounds like surviving, and surviving isn't the same as living. Tom's eyes flashed with anger again. What do you know about my life? You stand behind that desk every night and tell jokes and play games. Your biggest stress is whether a bit lands or not. Don't lecture me about living when you have no idea what it's like to carry the weight I carry. You're right, Jimmy said, not backing down. I don't know what it's like to be you, but I know what it's like to feel like you're drowning while everyone thinks you're swimming. I know what it's like to smile when you're breaking inside. Maybe our circumstances are different, but the feeling isn't unique to you, Tom. Tom's anger deflated as quickly as it had risen. I'm not special, is that what you're saying? I'm saying your pain is valid, but so is everyone else's, Jimmy explained. You're not alone in feeling alone, but you're choosing to stay isolated because you think that's what strength looks like. Strength is not breaking down on national television, Tom muttered. Strength is being honest about when you're not okay, Jimmy countered. Strength is asking for help. Strength is admitting that the person everyone thinks is invincible is actually just human. Tom looked up at the studio lights, blinking rapidly. I don't know how to be just human anymore. I've been Tom Cruise, action star, for so long that I don't know who I'd be without it. Maybe that's something worth finding out, Jimmy suggested. And how exactly do I do that? Tom asked, genuine curiosity in his voice now. How do I separate myself from the image when the image is what everyone wants from me? You start small, Jimmy said. You start by having conversations like this one, by letting people see that you're more than the stunts and the smiles, by being willing to be imperfect. Tom shook his head slowly. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple, Jimmy acknowledged, but it might be necessary, because what you're doing right now, this performance of perfection, it's not sustainable. Nobody can maintain that forever. Eventually, something breaks. And what if what breaks is me? Tom asked quietly. What if I let people in and they don't like what they find? What if the real me is disappointing? Then they're looking for the wrong things, Jimmy said firmly. Anyone who can't appreciate your humanity isn't worth performing for. Tom sat in silence, processing. The audience, which had been utterly still throughout this exchange, seemed to be holding their collective breath. You've given me a lot to think about, Tom finally said, his voice tired but somehow lighter. I don't know if I'm ready to make any big changes. But you've definitely gotten through to me in a way nobody has in a long time. That's all I wanted, Jimmy said with a small smile. Just to have a real moment with you. Well, you got it, Tom replied, managing a genuine smile of his own. Though I'm pretty sure my publicist is having a heart attack right now. Jimmy chuckled softly. Your publicist isn't the only one. My producers are probably scrambling right now, trying to figure out if we can even air this. Will you? Tom asked, genuine curiosity in his tone. Air it, or will this just disappear? Get edited down to the safe parts. Jimmy paused, considering the question seriously. I think that's up to you. This is your moment, your vulnerability on display. If you want it cut, I'll respect that. Tom looked out at the audience, really seeing them for what felt like the first time all night. Hundreds of faces staring back at him, not with judgment, but with something that looked almost like empathy. No, he said slowly, don't cut it. Let people see it. Maybe it's time they knew that I'm not actually superhuman. That's brave, Jimmy said. Or stupid, Tom replied with a wry smile. I'll let you know which one, after I see how the internet reacts. The internet is going to have opinions no matter what you do, Jimmy pointed out. At least this way, they're reacting to something real. Tom nodded, then looked directly at Jimmy with an intensity that had been missing from their earlier, more performative banter. Can I ask you something now? Since we're apparently doing radical honesty tonight. Of course, Jimmy said, looking slightly nervous for the first time. Why did you really do this? Tom asked, and don't give me the line about wanting a real conversation. There's something else. I can see it in your eyes. You needed this as much as I apparently did. Jimmy's smile faded. He looked down at his desk, shuffling some note cards that he hadn't touched all interview. You're right, I did need this. I've been doing this show for years. And lately, I've been feeling like a fraud. Every night, the same formula. Celebrity walks out. We joke around. They promote whatever they're selling. Everyone goes home happy. And I started wondering what the point was. Are we connecting with anyone, or are we just filling airtime? So you decided to blow up your own format, Tom said, understanding dawning in his eyes. You used me as the guinea pig for your crisis of purpose. That sounds worse than it was, Jimmy protested weakly. But it's accurate, Tom pressed. You were tired of the superficial conversations, so you forced a deep one. Consequences be damned. Do I have that right? Jimmy met his eyes. Yes, and I'm sorry if I ambushed you. That wasn't fair. No, it wasn't, Tom agreed, but I'm also not sorry it happened. You pushed me into a corner, and instead of just doing my usual deflection routine, something broke open. Maybe it needed to break. Maybe we both needed it to break, Jimmy offered. Tom leaned back in his chair, a strange sense of calm washing over him. You know what the really crazy thing is? I feel lighter right now than I have in years. Terrified about what comes next, but lighter. That's what happens when you stop carrying everything alone, Jimmy said. The weight gets redistributed. Redistributed to where exactly? Tom asked with a slight laugh. To the millions of people who are going to analyze this interview frame by frame. To anyone who's ever felt the same way you do, Jimmy answered. And trust me, that's more people than you think. The perfect life you project, it makes people feel inadequate. But this, what you've shown tonight, this helps people realize that everyone struggles. Even Tom Cruise. Tom considered this. I never thought about it that way. I always figured people wanted the illusion, the escape. Nobody wants to see their heroes struggling. People want to see their heroes being human, Jimmy corrected. They want to know that success doesn't mean the absence of problems. They want permission to not be okay, sometimes, and you think me falling apart on your show gives them that permission? Tom asked skeptically. I think you, being honest about your struggles, gives them that permission, Jimmy clarified. You didn't fall apart, Tom. You just stopped pretending. There's a difference. Tom was quiet for a moment, then spoke with deliberate care. I have to tell you something, and I need you to really hear this. What happened here tonight, this can't become a regular thing. I can't come on talk shows and have therapy sessions. I can't make vulnerability my new brand. Do you understand what I'm saying? I do, Jimmy nodded. And I'm not asking you to. One honest conversation doesn't obligate you to a lifetime of public confessions. But maybe it opens a door for you to be honest with yourself, in private, about what you need. What I need, Tom repeated, testing the words. I don't even know where to start figuring that out. Start with the small stuff, Jimmy suggested. You said you wanted to sit somewhere quiet for a week. Do it. Take a vacation where you're not promoting anything, not preparing for anything, just existing. I have 3 movies scheduled back to back, Tom said automatically, then caught himself. And that right there is the problem, isn't it? My first instinct is to tell you why I can't, not to figure out how I could. Old habits, Jimmy said with understanding. They don't break overnight. No, they don't, Tom agreed. He looked at Jimmy with something approaching respect. You're sneakier than you look, Fallon. You came at me sideways with all this, and by the time I realized what was happening, I was already in it. Would you have engaged if I'd been direct from the start? Jimmy asked. Tom thought about it. Probably not. I would have shut it down immediately, made a joke, changed the subject. The whole toolkit? Exactly, Jimmy said. Sometimes you have to sneak past people's defenses, even if it feels manipulative, especially when those defenses are hurting them. So you're a manipulative therapist, talk show host now, Tom said, but there was warmth in his voice. What happened to just being funny? Funny doesn't change anything, Jimmy said quietly, and I think we're all tired of nothing changing. Tom stood up, and this time it wasn't out of anger or a desire to leave. He extended his hand to Jimmy, who stood and shook it. Thank you, Tom said simply. I mean that. Thank you for caring enough to push me, even when it was uncomfortable. Thank you for staying, Jimmy replied, and for being brave enough to be real. I know that cost you something. Everything costs something, Tom said. The question is whether what you get is worth what you pay. I think tonight might have been worth it. I hope so, Jimmy said sincerely. Tom turned to face the audience one more time. I don't really know what to say to all of you. You just watched me have a pretty intense moment, and that wasn't what any of us signed up for tonight. But I hope, if nothing else, it was honest. And maybe that's worth something. The audience erupted into applause, not the polite television applause from earlier, but something more genuine and sustained. Tom looked surprised by the response, his eyes getting misty again. They're not applauding the performance, Jimmy said softly, just loud enough for Tom to hear. They're applauding the person. Tom nodded, not trusting his voice. He waved to the crowd, then walked off the stage, his stride less confident than when he'd entered, but somehow more authentic. Jimmy watched him go, then turned back to the camera. Ladies and gentlemen, Tom Cruise. That was different than what we usually do here. I know, but sometimes, different is exactly what we need. Sometimes the most entertaining thing we can do is stop entertaining and start being real with each other. He paused, collecting his thoughts. If you made it through this whole interview, I want to know what you think. Did we go too far? Was this the kind of content you want to see? Or should we stick to the games and the laughs and keep things light? Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already and drop a comment below. I really want to know, do you think celebrities owe us authenticity? Or is the performance part of what we're paying for? Let me know. Thanks for watching. The camera held on Jimmy for a moment longer as he looked down at his desk, the weight of what had just happened settling over the studio. Then, finally, the screen faded to black.